Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This video uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today, we're taking a deep dive into Shakespeare's Hamlet. You might already be familiar with the play, but we're going beyond the surface level. Using Hamlet, William Shakespeare, and Thompson Neal Taylor.pdf, we'll uncover some surprising insights about this timeless masterpiece and its characters.
It's fascinating how Hamlet holds a unique place in global culture. Even those who haven't read the play often recognize the iconic to be or not to be soliloquy. The volume of scholarship dedicated to Hamlet speaks volumes about its enduring appeal.
Absolutely. The book mentions over 400 publications a year focused on Hamlet. And it's not just academic circles, even visually. Elements like the skull and the ghost have become ingrained in our collective consciousness. You see them everywhere.
Yeah.
But despite this, Hamlet himself remains an enigma.
That's the paradox. He has the largest speaking role in all of Shakespeare's works. Yet his true nature remains open to interpretation. His soliloquies offer glimpses into his intellect and internal struggles. But ultimately, we're left to decipher who Hamlet truly is. And this is where it gets really interesting. Interpretations of Hamlet have varied wildly across cultures and time periods.
So before we dive into those different interpretations, I'm really curious about the ghost. The book points out this intriguing paradox. The ghost's physical absence actually creates a feeling of overwhelming presence throughout the play.
It's a powerful absence. The ghost looms over the entire narrative, influencing Hamlet's actions and driving the plot forward. The book even compares it to the imposing Father Commendatore in Mozart's Don Giovanni. Both figures exert this paralyzing effect on the protagonist.
And then there's that fascinating allegorical interpretation of the ghost, representing Shakespeare himself, almost like the weight of the literary canon, bearing down on the play. This allegorical reading challenges the very notion of a traditional interpretation of Hamlet.
Right, and it makes you wonder, how have modern interpretations, particularly through Freudian and Marxist lenses, challenged those long-held assumptions about the play? For instance, before these perspectives emerged, Hamlet was often viewed in a more positive light.
The book highlights a fascinating anecdote from a 1601 diary entry by Thomas Rundle, an English sailor, who describes a performance of Hamlet in Sierra Leone. Shakespeare on the high seas, it seems. What does this tell us about the play's reach beyond traditional audiences, especially in a pre-digital age?
If the diary is authentic, it certainly challenges our assumptions about who had access to Shakespeare and how his work was received globally. It suggests that even in the 17th century, Hamlet had the power to transcend geographical and cultural boundaries, relying on memory and word of mouth to spread its influence.
Now, let's delve into the question of Hamlet's revenge. Is it purely accidental? Or is there a more calculated design behind it? To unravel this, we need to look at the source material, Saxo Grammaticus and Belforest.
In those earlier versions, the protagonist, Hamlet, is far more deliberate and calculated in his revenge. But Hamlet's path seems more accidental, as if he's stumbling towards his fate.
So how does Hamlet's mousetrap play within a play fit into this? Is it a deliberate strategy, or just another step in his seemingly haphazard journey?
The book suggests that the mousetrap serves a strategic purpose, much like Hamlet burning down the villain's hall in those earlier sources. It's Hamlet's way of exposing the truth and setting the events in motion, even if it appears less calculated on the surface.
So we've got this enigmatic character, a ghost that's both absent and omnipresent, and a revenge plot that might be more deliberate than it seems. But before we go further, let's talk about the different early printed texts of Hamlet, the quartos and the folio. The book emphasizes that we don't have a surviving authorial manuscript.
That's right. We're left with these early printed texts, each with its own variations, adding layers of complexity to understanding Hamlet. The quartos are smaller, pamphlet-like publications from Shakespeare's time, while the folio is a larger collection, published posthumously.
So you're telling me there's no definitive version of Hamlet?
Precisely. This lack of a single authoritative text opens up the play to a world of debate and interpretation. It forces us to grapple with textual variations and make informed decisions about which readings to prioritize. For instance, there's an ongoing debate around the spelling of sellingly or fellingly in Act 5, Scene 2, a seemingly small detail that actually impacts how we understand Hamlet's intentions in that moment.
Wow. I never realized just how complex the textual history of Hamlet really is. It's like we're piecing together a puzzle with missing pieces, trying to figure out Shakespeare's original vision. But how has this lack of a definitive text impacted the way Hamlet has been staged throughout history?
That's a great question. The book traces the evolution of Hamlet on stage, noting a shift from elegant declamation in the 19th century to more psychologically driven portrayals in the 20th century.
Why do you think that shift occurred?
The rise of Freudian psychology undoubtedly played a role. Actors and directors began to view Hamlet as a more complex, conflicted figure, driven by unconscious desires and motivations. This added a new dimension to the play, pushing beyond surface-level interpretations and delving into the depths of Hamlet's psyche.
And I imagine the emergence of film further influenced those interpretations, offering new ways to visualize Hamlet and bringing those psychological nuances to life.
Absolutely. Film has had a profound impact on both stage productions and our understanding of Hamlet, offering a more visually rich and nuanced approach to interpreting the play.
So we've talked about Hamlet, the ghost, and the textual history of the play. But what about the other characters? Has the book revealed any interesting insights into how they've been reinterpreted over time, particularly in light of changing social and cultural contexts?
Definitely. There have been numerous attempts to reinterpret characters like Gertrude and Ophelia, especially through feminist lenses. These readings challenge traditional interpretations and offer fresh perspectives on these complex female characters, their motivations, and their agency within the play.
That makes sense, especially considering the evolving social and cultural landscape. But before we dive into those reinterpretations, I'm struck by the book's emphasis on the significance of stage directions in Hamlet. The early texts have minimal stage directions, which seems to leave a lot open to interpretation for actors and directors.
It's true. Those sparse stage directions create a blank canvas, inviting us to imagine the play coming to life in countless ways. Take, for instance, Ophelia's state of mind and appearance in Act 4, Scene 5. The text doesn't explicitly describe her actions or attire, so different productions have visualized her in wildly different ways.
So even something as seemingly straightforward as a character's appearance becomes open to interpretation. Are there any other notable examples of this?
The book specifically mentions the Q1 stage direction. Enter Ophelia as before. This seemingly simple instruction actually carries significant weight, informing our understanding of Ophelia's character arc and how she's meant to be portrayed throughout the play.
It's fascinating how these seemingly minor details can have such a profound impact on our interpretation of the play and its characters. With all these variations and interpretations, what are the challenges involved in editing Hamlet? I mean, where do you even begin?
The book delves into the complexities of navigating those variations. Between the quartos and the folio, editors have to make informed decisions about which readings to choose, considering factors like printing accuracy, the influence of actors and scribes, and even Shakespeare's own potential revisions. It's a meticulous process that requires careful consideration and a deep understanding of the play's textual history.
It sounds like a daunting task.
Yeah.
But what I find so fascinating is that even in those seemingly minor details, like the choice between sellingly or fellingly, editors are essentially shaping our understanding of Hamlet.
Exactly. They're not just transcribing words. They're making choices that impact how we interpret the play and its characters. And then there's the issue of punctuation. Modern editions tend to modernize punctuation for clarity, but the original texts use different styles, which can influence our understanding of the rhythm and flow of the dialogue.
It's amazing how these minute details can have such a ripple effect on our interpretation of Hamlet. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the Elizabethan practice of actors doubling roles. How did that work in Hamlet?
Elizabethan acting companies were much smaller than what we're accustomed to today, so actors often had to play multiple roles in a single play. Hamlet is no exception to this.
It makes sense from a practical standpoint. But how did they decide who played which roles? Was it purely a matter of practicality, or were there artistic considerations involved?
While practicality certainly played a role, the book suggests that doubling also offered some intriguing artistic possibilities. The way actors doubled roles could influence character interpretation and audience perception, potentially creating subtle connections between characters, or highlighting thematic contrasts.
So doubling roles isn't just about practicality. It can actually add another layer of meaning to the play. Where can I learn more about this?
The book has an entire appendix dedicated to exploring the challenges and possibilities of doubling roles in Hamlet. It's a fascinating deep dive into the practical constraints and artistic opportunities of Elizabethan theater.
Definitely adding that to my reading list.
Okay.
Before we wrap up this section, I have to ask about one of my favorite parts of the book.
Yeah.
The section on close reading.
Ah, yes. The book does a fantastic job of showcasing the meticulous process of textual analysis. It takes those particularly challenging or ambiguous phrases from Hamlet and walks the reader through different interpretations and editorial choices.
I love how they break down those complex passages and really unpack the language of the play. It's like getting a masterclass in how to truly engage with Shakespeare's words. Do you have a favorite example from the book?
Their analysis of the phrase "sledded poleaxe" from Act 1, Scene 1 is particularly memorable. It's a notoriously difficult phrase to interpret, and the book does a brilliant job of exploring the various possibilities, considering the historical context and different interpretations of the words.
I remember that one. Sledded poleaxe definitely left me scratching my head.
Whoa.
But I love how the book shows us that even when we don't have a definitive answer, the process of exploring those possibilities deepens our understanding of the play and reveals layers of meaning we might otherwise miss. It's like seeing Hamlet in a whole new light.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of close reading. It allows us to slow down, pay attention to those nuances, and uncover new layers of meaning in even the most familiar passages. It reminds us that there's always more to discover in Hamlet, even after centuries of analysis and interpretation.
Well, I'm definitely feeling inspired to revisit Hamlet with a fresh perspective after this deep dive. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the enduring mystery of Hamlet's character to the evolution of the play on stage, the textual variations, and the impact of doubling roles.
We have. This book offers a wealth of insights for anyone looking to deepen their understanding of Hamlet, whether you're a seasoned Shakespeare scholar or just beginning to explore his works.
It's truly a must-read for anyone who wants to appreciate the complexities of this timeless masterpiece. And remember, this is just scratching the surface of what the book has to offer. There's so much more to explore within its pages.
Absolutely. And I encourage you to seek out the full text of Hamlet, William Shakespeare, and Thompson Neil Taylor.pdf and embark on your own journey of discovery.
All right, before we delve even deeper into Hamlet, let's take a quick pause. But don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to continue our exploration of Hamlet with even more fascinating insights.
And we're back with our deep dive into Hamlet, still guided by the insights from Hamlet, William Shakespeare, and Thompson Neil Taylor.pdf. Before the pause, we were talking about those minimal stage directions in those early Hamlet texts. So instead of limiting interpretation, those sparse stage directions actually open up a world of possibilities.
It's like Shakespeare's inviting us to co-create the play alongside him, to imagine the scenes unfolding in our own unique ways. And this leads us to the fascinating topic of Hamlet's textual history. Like we mentioned earlier, no original authorial manuscript exists.
Right. We only have those early printed texts to work with. The quartos and the folio. The quartos, they were smaller, pamphlet-like publications that circulated during Shakespeare's lifetime. Well, the folio is a larger, more comprehensive collection of his plays, published after his death.
But how do these different versions impact our understanding of Hamlet?
Well, the quartos and the folio, they contain variations, ranging from minor differences in spelling and punctuation to entire passages that appear in one version, but not the other. This lack of a definitive text adds another layer of complexity.
So how do editors even begin to grapple with these discrepancies? It's like trying to solve a mystery with multiple, sometimes conflicting clues.
It is a bit like detective work. Editors have to weigh the evidence, consider the historical context, and make informed decisions about which readings to prioritize. For example, the choice between sellingly or fellingly in Act 5, Scene 2. It might seem minor, but it can subtly alter our understanding of Hamlet's intentions in that particular moment.
So even seemingly insignificant details can have a significant impact on how we interpret the play.
Absolutely. These textual variations remind us that there isn't one definitive Hamlet. It's a play that continues to evolve through interpretation and reinterpretation, even the punctuation choices made by modern editors. They can affect the rhythm and flow of the dialogue, shaping our perception of the characters and their interaction.
The book also discusses how certain errors or inconsistencies in the early texts might actually provide clues about how Hamlet was performed. In Shakespeare's time, for instance, sometimes stage directions mention characters who aren't explicitly named in the dialogue.
Right. This suggests that actors might have doubled roles, which was a common practice in Elizabethan theater because of smaller acting companies. The appendix in Hamlet, William Shakespeare, and Thompson Neil Taylor.pdf really dives deep into this practice, exploring both the logistical challenges and the creative opportunities it presented.
Doubling roles must have required incredible skill and versatility from those actors. It's fascinating to think about how this practice might have shaped the audience's experience of the play, creating connections between characters or highlighting thematic contrasts. But let's move on to something that really grabbed my attention: the book's emphasis on the importance of close reading.
Close reading is crucial. When dealing with a text as rich and layered as Hamlet, it involves paying attention to every word, every punctuation mark, every nuance of language, to unlock deeper layers of meaning.
It's like savoring a fine wine. You slow down, appreciate the subtleties, and discover nuances you might have missed otherwise.
Exactly. And sometimes, those close readings lead to surprising discoveries. For example, the book's analysis of sledded poleaxe in Act 1, Scene 1 highlights just how much can be gleaned from examining even the most seemingly straightforward phrases.
Yes. Sledded poleaxe.
Yeah.
I remember feeling completely perplexed by that phrase. The book does a fantastic job of exploring different interpretations, considering the historical context and the various meanings those words could have held.
Right. And even if a definitive interpretation remains elusive, the process itself enriches our understanding and appreciation of the play's complexity. It reminds us that Hamlet is full of layers, waiting to be peeled back and explored.
It's like Hamlet is an endless well of meaning. The more you delve into it, the more you discover. This book does a fantastic job of challenging traditional interpretations, too. They question whether Hamlet's revenge is purely accidental or if there's a deliberate strategy at play.
They also explore how interpretations of the play have evolved over time, from the more positive, pre-Freudian readings to the more complex, psychologically driven, modern interpretations. Each generation seems to find new questions to ask, new perspectives to consider.
It's amazing how a play written centuries ago can still feel so relevant, so alive with meaning. It speaks to our timeless fascination with human nature, with the complexities of ambition, revenge, love, and loss.
It's a testament to Shakespeare's genius that Hamlet continues to resonate with audiences across cultures and generations.
Now, before we move on to the book's exploration of specific character reinterpretations, I want to talk about the significance of those sparse stage directions again. It seems like such a unique aspect of Hamlet.
Those minimal stage directions, they invite us to fill in the blanks, to use our imagination, to visualize the scenes, and bring them to life in our own minds. It's like a collaborative act of creation between the playwright, the actors, and the audience. Take Ophelia's state of mind and appearance in Act 4, Scene 5, for example. The text doesn't prescribe exactly how she should be portrayed, leaving room for directors and actors to make creative choices that reflect their own interpretations.
So even something as seemingly simple as a character's appearance becomes open to interpretation. That's remarkable. Are there any other notable examples?
The book highlights the Q1 stage direction, enter Ophelia as before. This simple instruction might seem inconsequential, but it actually speaks volumes about Ophelia's character arc and how she's meant to be perceived throughout the play.
It's amazing how these subtle details can influence our understanding of the characters and the play as a whole. But with so much open to interpretation, editing Hamlet must be a monumental task.
It is a challenge, but also an incredibly rewarding one. Editors have to navigate those variations between the quartos and the folio, making informed decisions about which readings to prioritize. While remaining true to the spirit of the text, they must consider the historical context, the potential influence of actors and scribes, and even the possibility of Shakespeare's own revisions.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
But what I find fascinating is that even in those seemingly small editorial choices, they are shaping our understanding of Hamlet.
Exactly. They're not merely transcribing words. They're actively shaping how we experience and interpret the play. They're also faced with the challenge of modernizing punctuation, which can alter the rhythm and flow of Shakespeare's language. It's a complex process that requires a deep understanding of both the play and the editorial craft.
Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the Elizabethan practice of actors doubling roles. How did that work in Hamlet?
As we discussed earlier, Elizabethan acting companies were much smaller than those we see today, so actors often played multiple roles in a single production. And Hamlet is no exception. The book's appendix provides a fascinating exploration of this practice.
I can imagine it must have been challenging for actors to embody multiple characters, especially in a play as complex as Hamlet.
It certainly required incredible skill and versatility, but the book suggests that doubling roles also offered some unique artistic possibilities. It allowed for subtle connections between characters, highlighting thematic contrasts, and adding layers of meaning to the play.
So doubling roles wasn't just a practical necessity, it was an opportunity to enhance the storytelling. and enrich the audience's experience. It's incredible to think about the ingenuity and creativity that went into staging a play like Hamlet during Shakespeare's time. Now, before we move on to the next section, I want to revisit that fascinating anecdote about the performance of Hamlet in Sierra Leone.
Oh, yes. The diary entry from Thomas Rundle, the English sailor, who described witnessing a performance of Hamlet in Sierra Leone in 1601. It's an intriguing piece of evidence that challenges our assumptions about the reach of Shakespeare's work and its audience.
If authentic, it suggests that Hamlet transcended geographical and cultural boundaries, even in the 17th century, capturing the imaginations of audiences far beyond London's theaters.
Absolutely. It's a testament to the enduring power of storytelling and the universal themes explored in Hamlet. This anecdote reminds us that great works of art have the ability to connect with people across time and cultures, speaking to our shared human experiences.
Well, after this deep dive, I'm definitely feeling a renewed sense of wonder and curiosity about Hamlet.
Well,
It's amazing how a play written centuries ago can still feel so relevant and insightful.
it's a testament to Shakespeare's genius that Hamlet continues to provoke discussion and inspire new interpretations. And that's precisely what makes this book so valuable. It encourages us to engage with the play on a deeper level, to question our assumptions, and to embrace the ambiguity and complexity that lie at the heart of this timeless masterpiece.
Now, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, let's take a brief pause. When we return, we'll explore the book's insights into how certain characters, particularly Gertrude and Ophelia, have been reinterpreted over time, especially through the feminist lens. Stay with us. We're back for the final part of our deep dive into Hamlet. We're still using Hamlet, William Shakespeare, and Thompson, Neil Taylor.pdf to help guide us, and you just heard us talking about all those sparse stage directions and textual variations. Now let's get into how the book explores character reinterpretations. It specifically focuses on Gertrude and Ophelia and how they've been viewed.
But the feminist lens, feminist readings of Hamlet challenge the traditional interpretations of these characters, especially, those often passive and victimized portrayals of Gertrude and Ophelia. They encourage us to consider the societal constraints placed upon women in Elizabethan England and how those limitations might have shaped their choices and actions.
So instead of simply accepting them as victims of circumstance, we're encouraged to, dig deeper into their motivations and complexities.
Exactly. Feminist critics argue that Gertrude and Ophelia are far more complex and multifaceted than traditional readings might suggest. They point to moments in the text where these women demonstrate agency, intelligence, and even defiance.
Can you give me a specific example of how Gertrude has been reinterpreted through this lens?
Well, some feminist readings argue that Gertrude's marriage to Claudius, which is often seen as a betrayal of Hamlet's father, might be understood as a strategic move to protect herself and her son within, a patriarchal power structure. They suggest that Gertrude isn't simply a weak-willed woman, manipulated by a villain, but rather a savvy political player, navigating a treacherous landscape.
That's a fascinating reinterpretation. It adds a whole new dimension to Gertrude's character. It challenges us to reconsider her motivations and the limitations placed upon her as a woman in that society.
And similarly, feminist readings of Ophelia challenge that traditional portrayal of her as a fragile, passive victim, driven to madness by the men in her life. They suggest that Ophelia's madness, while undoubtedly tragic, can also be seen as a form of rebellion against the constraints placed upon her.
So, rather than simply succumbing to the pressures of her situation, she's actively pushing back against them, even if it manifests in what we perceive as madness.
Precisely. Feminist interpretations of Ophelia highlight her intelligence, her wit, and the subtle ways she challenges societal expectations. They argue that her madness, while tragic, is not simply a product of weakness, but a complex response to the oppressive forces that seek to control her.
These feminist reinterpretations are so thought-provoking. They remind us that even in a play as well-known as Hamlet, there's always more to discover, new layers to uncover.
And that's what makes this book, and Hamlet itself, so compelling. They challenge us to engage with the text on multiple levels, to question our assumptions, and to appreciate the enduring power of these characters and their stories.
Now, before we wrap up this whole deep dive, I'd love to get your thoughts on what stood out to you. The most significant takeaway from Hamlet, William Shakespeare, and Thompson, Neil Taylor.pdf.
For me, the most significant takeaway is the book's emphasis on the active role of the reader or audience in interpreting Hamlet. It reminds us that there is no one definitive interpretation, but rather a multitude of possibilities, waiting to be explored. It encourages us to engage with the text critically, to ask questions, and to embrace the ambiguity and complexity that make this play so endlessly fascinating.
I completely agree. This book is a powerful reminder that Hamlet is not, a static, fixed entity, but a living, breathing work of art that continues to evolve and resonate. With each new generation, it challenges us to bring our own experiences, our own perspectives, and critical thinking to the text. And in doing so, we discover something new, something that speaks to our own time and place.
Exactly. And as you continue your own exploration of Hamlet, remember to delve into those textual notes, explore those fascinating appendices, and let the book guide you on your own unique journey of discovery.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to ponder. Before we sign off, any final thoughts?
Just this. Don't let this deep dive be the end of your exploration. Seek out the full text of Hamlet, William Shakespeare, Anne Thompson, Neil Taylor.pdf, and embark on your own journey through the rich landscape of this timeless masterpiece. Ask yourself, what does Hamlet mean to you? How does your understanding of the play reflect your own values and worldview?
What a perfect note to end on. So much to think about, so much to explore. And if you're eager to nourish your mind on the go, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and purchase via the link below. Until next time, keep those minds mindful.